In today's video, I'll be turning a 2x4 tea light holder. 2x4 tea light holders are an inexpensive gift that take little time and materials to make. Include some traditional tea lights or battery-powered tea lights, and you have an inexpensive, useful, and attractive gift for Christmas or birthdays. They even make a nice housewarming gift. But you're not just limited to tea lights. You can also use 2x4 offcuts to make small change or key bowls, lidded boxes, and jewelry and ring holders. These are just a few examples of items I've made from scrap lumber. With the exception of the finials, all of these were made from 2x4 offcuts. Keep watching to see how I do it. Alright, so in order for us to turn our 2x4 votives, lidded boxes, whatever else, we need some blanks. Very simple, we just cut some squares off of a 2x4. 2x4s are typically 3.5 inches across. This one's slightly shy, so measure the board you're using and use that measurement to set your stop block on your miter saw. Okay, so we have our 4 blanks cut. The next step is to find center, and we want to find center on both sides of the blank. So in order to do that, I'm going to use a plastic center finder, but you could use a straight edge or a ruler, whatever you have. So what I do, or tend to do, is I run my center finder on all 4 corners, because that way, if my blank is not a perfect square, we will still be able to find the exact center, because, oops, sorry, creates crosshairs, and in the middle of those crosshairs, that's our center. So I'm going to take a punch, and I'm going to get it right in there as close, as perfectly center as I can. We make a divot. I already marked the other side. We do the same thing over here. Now we're ready to mount and turn. So we have our piece of 2x4 here cut to size. We found centers on both sides. We rounded off the 4 sides over at the router table. Now we're ready to mount it to the glue block on the lathe, and we're going to drill a hole for our tea light. This hole will serve 2 purposes. 1, it'll be a hole for the tea light, obviously, and 2, it'll allow us to reverse mount it onto the pin jaws on our 4-jaw chuck. Now if you don't have a chuck, or you don't have pin jaws for your chuck, there's a couple different methods you can use. You can turn a jam chuck, and that can either be mounted in your chuck if you have one, or it can be mounted to a faceplate. You can also reverse mount this. You know, once you drill your hole, you sand this up to however far you want to sand it to. Heat the glue up, pull this off. You can reverse mount this, and using the center that we found earlier will give you a good reference point. Pull your tailstock up, recenter this, glue it back on here, and once the glue sets up, you're ready to turn the back side. Now that method does involve heating the glue up again, removing that, and you're probably going to have some work to do to clean up some of the excess glue on the face here. But if you sand it nice and smooth, it shouldn't be a problem. So let's get this mounted, and let's get the turning started. Okay, so we're going to move our banjo out of the way for right now. This is the face that we want to drill our hole through. We're going to pull up our tailstock, and we're going to center our live center. We're going to put it right in that center there. Lock the tailstock down, put a little pressure, and then we're going to take our hot glue gun, and we're going to run a bead of hot glue around the back side that will connect our glue block to the back of the blank. You want to make sure the bead goes all the way around the blank and your glue block, so you get a good secure connection. And you don't need to really glob on a lot of glue either. Just make sure you got a nice even bead all the way around. And once this is set up, it'll hold very securely, more so than what you might think. Okay, so we're all the way around there, and we're going to let that set up. It's going to take it a few minutes to set up. You want to make sure it's set up completely before you start drilling or turning. Alright, my glue is set up. It's hardened up nice. I got a good connection here to my piece of 2x4. I can drill this now and it's going to be fine. I'm still going to wear a face shield and a dust mask when I do this. Your eyes and your lungs are definitely worth more than whatever you pay for safety equipment. So buy it, use it, thank me later. I'm going to be gifting this with a LED tea light candle, and it measures about 1.5 inches, pretty much almost exactly in diameter. I'm going to use a 1 5/8 inch Forstner bit. That way I get a little space there, so it's easy to pull this in and out. You're going to be turning it off and on, or the person you're gifting it to is going to be turning it off and on frequently. And that'll also allow them to use regular tea lights if they prefer a real candle over the battery powered ones. So I'm using a 1 5/8 inch Forstner bit. If you don't have Forstner bits, or you don't have Forstner bits that large, a couple things you can do. You can either drill up to your largest size Forstner bit, and then using a bowl gouge or a scraper or a carbide chisel, you can enlarge the hole until your tea light candle fits in there very easily. Or you can forego drilling completely. Maybe you don't have a drill chuck for your lathe. You can, same method, take a pair of calipers or some other method to set your distance, or your diameter, I should say, and then you can turn that just like turning a small bowl or something like that, but you're going to want a flat bottom for this to fit into. So we got a couple different methods now. If you don't have all the tools or the equipment that I have, you can still make these easy, quick, inexpensive. Let's get to it. Okay, so the hole's drilled. I drilled it a little deeper than maybe I needed to. This is slightly below the surface here, but I'm going to sand this some. It shouldn't take too much sanding. It's pretty nice as it is. I am going to turn a slight dovetail in here with a skew, just so I get a better connection on my chuck. But other than that, that's pretty much all it is. We're not going to turn the face because we rounded off these sides. There's a certain look we're going for. We want it to look like this. Okay, so we're just going to sand here. Be careful you don't round off your corners too much. It detracts from the look. Alright, so I sanded this up to 400. I sanded the sides and the face. I sanded the inside a little bit. I cut my recess in here. I was careful not to lose too much of the detail on my roundovers. I did soften these edges just a little bit, just kind of hit it with sandpaper this way, just to break that sharp edge. And I chamfered this right here with the bowl gouge, just to soften that line, give it a little more visual interest. I took my depth gauge here and I took a measurement of how deep my hole for my T-light is, and that way when I reverse mount it, I can hold my depth gauge there and I can tell just how far, well rather, you got the wrong side there. Kind of gives me an idea, let me see that or not, yeah. Kind of gives me an idea of how much material, or how far I can go in before I hit that hole. We're not going to take very much off the bottom, we don't really need to, but it's a good idea to know where the bottom of this hole is before you start turning the back so you don't go all the way through. Alright, so I'm going to reverse mount this onto my pin jaws. If you have a glue block or you're going to use the glue block method, now is the time when you would reverse mount this onto your glue block and use the center point that we found earlier as your reference for that, or if you're using it as a jam chuck, same idea there. I'm mounting this to my chuck with pin jaws as I'm fortunate enough to have this. Alright, so we know our depth of our hole. We just need to know the diameter. We know it's 1 5/8 inches. So we can just take our calipers and you can use the drill bit. Out of frame there. There we are. You can just set that, get the diameter. Alright. Set our calipers up against here. You can do this with the lathe running, but you just want to try to get a line on your calipers that's even with both. So we kind of got an idea there. And you take a pencil, and you can mark a line. And what that does is you have your depth and you know where the diameter of your hole is. So you can turn around that. You want to turn this in a little bit. We're going to do that here in just a minute. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to draw a line because we want to have feet, okay? And we don't want them so thin. This is pine, remember this is pine, so it gets weak as it's thin. We don't want them very tiny. So we're going to mark a line about where we want our feet to be, or how big we want them to be. You can have very wide feet if you want, or you can go a little narrower. So I'm going to just hold my pencil here, and I'm going to try to make an arc here. As the lathe is spinning, this will look like one solid line. And this is where you're going to come in with your gouge or your carbide tool, or whatever. I prefer a bowl gouge. I don't know how comfortable I'd feel using a spindle gouge for this. Definitely not going to use a spindle roughing gouge. Face turning, you do not use a spindle roughing gouge. There's another safety PSA for you. Okay, I'm going to turn about 1700. That's as high as my lathe goes on this middle pulley. And just make sure your bowl gouge is good and sharp. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a couple reference lines with the bowl gouge, and then I'm going to face this off and get a nice flat surface, and then we'll turn inside this, get our legs, we want to make some little arches there like that. See? That's our goal anyway. So let's get started. I want to start my cut right about where that pencil line is. I just want a little bit of a reference there. And then I'm also going to give myself a little bit of a reference here where my T-light hole is. Alright. You can see there I made myself some grooves.
thing off and make it nice and flat across here. Now remember, you have corners here whipping around, so you want to bring our bowl gouge in very gently and move in so it just starts, just right there, you hear that? You put the corner, and it takes very light pass. Like that. Okay, so it's starting to face that off there. You want your feet to be nice and level, nice and even. So there we go. Alright, come back. Just like that. Alright. The idea is you want to just kind of flatten that off. Getting a little more of a ridge there than I want. Alright, so here's the thing. The size of your feet are going to kind of determine how big your arch or relief or whatever you want to call this here, okay? So the bigger the feet, the less space between them that's going to be cut away. So that's just something to keep in mind. It depends on how, the smaller the feet, these are pretty small, but you have a pretty wide arch right there. So it just depends on the look you're going for. These are actually going to be a little bit bigger than I want, so I'm going to come back just a little bit and try to, there we go. There we are. Okay, so yeah, that's getting a little smaller. And the camera, you can't tell from that angle, but I'm starting to get a very slight arch starting here between the feet. So we're going to continue coming back just a little bit. So that's about where I want. I'm going to turn this in more, and the deeper I turn this away, the higher my arch will go. We're just going to keep turning until we get to where we want to be. Just to give myself a little visual reference here, so I don't come back and cut these feet too thin. Okay, so we're starting to get a nice arch in there. You might be able to see that on the camera. Okay. So I'm going a little deeper here, and then we're going to shape this into kind of a dome-like shape. You just want to make sure you take enough of this off that it's not hitting the surface that you're setting it on. You want the feet to, set on the surface, obviously. You don't want this sitting on it, so we're going to take some of that off. Then you want to take one more pass, and then we're going to turn the bottom here. Okay, well I did myself a disservice there. I got some ridges in there that I don't want to have to sand out, so I'm going to try to take a light pass and get rid of that. That's better. We want to turn in mind of preventing as much sanding as possible. So you don't want to just hog in, you know, as hard and fast as you can. You want to take these nice light passes so you save yourself a lot of sanding time later on. At least that's the method I use, because I don't know anybody that actually likes to sand. So, all right, we're going to turn this middle to our dome, and other than sanding, that'll pretty well finish this. Well, other than actually putting finish on it. So we're going to turn this dome. We're going to finish that up. Be aware of where these corners are. Be aware of where your hand is. Be aware of how you're entering and exiting your cut. Okay, you don't want to come back here. You're going to hit your legs. All right. So take your time. We're not in any hurry here. Get as nice a cut as you can, as safely as you can. All right, back to it. Okay, that's looking pretty good. I'm not sure if I'm past my legs. Nope. So I'm going to turn that down just a little more, because this is proud of the legs. I shouldn't have turned my legs back as far as I did, but that's all right. I think we got enough wood here to work with. Oh yeah. Yeah, I think we got enough here. I'll get rid of some more of this. Alright, I'm pretty happy with that shape. I think we might need a little more clearance. A couple little ridges right here. I might try to take that out with a scraper. But other than that, it's a pretty nice cut. Shouldn't take a lot of sanding, which is good. Who wants to sand? Might take just a little bit more off of there, but it's just about done. Always make sure you spin your piece by hand when you're putting your tool rest back. You don't want the legs smacking the tool rest either. So we're going to take just a little bit more off of this. Alright, so I have my round nose scraper. There we are. And I'm going to try to get rid of this line in here so I don't have to sand it out. If you're going to do this, just be aware again, you have your corners whipping around here. So you're going to be very careful of how you enter and exit with your scraper. You don't want to catch it on the side of these corners. Alright? So best method would be when this is running to come in, not even be touching the piece yet. Have your scraper here in the middle of the piece and then slowly work your way back. If you get lines and ledges like I did because I was impatient. So I'm going to come in with my scraper very gently. And I'm just going to try to work that ledge off of there. Very light patch. And just about got rid of all that. Alright. Another pass. I'm even going to come in on the inside of the legs just a little bit. Okay, that's pretty clean. I got a little bit of a ledge here, a little line there from a bow gouge, but I think we can sand that out without too much difficulty. Alright, so basically at this point you're done. Just some sanding. Make sure your feet are flat. Okay. Best way to do that is not how I did it. Make sure you face your piece off
before you start turning your legs. But since we didn't have a lot to work with here on the bottom, that's why I did what I did. So do as I say, not as I do. But other than that, we just do some sanding, and then again, your finish of choice. Okay, so we finished turning it. This is it, fresh off the lathe. I haven't sanded the back of it yet. When I do, I will sand it by hand with the lathe off, because it's just not very safe to sand these with it spinning. And that's why you want to get as smooth and clean as a surface as possible off the tool. That way you don't have very much sanding to do. And with this being the bottom, I'm probably going to sand it to 240, 320. There's no sense really going very high grit, but it's up to you. You can sand it as much or as little as you want. If you're going to paint these, probably 180, 220, 240, that'd be as high as I'd go with the sanding, because you just don't need to go very fine grit when you're going to paint these. Or you can use traditional wood finishes. There again, that's up to you. The only thing I don't recommend is friction polish for these types of shapes, because you just can't apply it with this spinning on the lathe like this. Not going to work. Now if you turn one like this, round, kind of a bowl shape, friction polish is an option then. But you can use practically any other finish. You could stain these, you could leave them bare wood. Here's one that's finished. This is Danish wood oil and wipe on poly. I put 2 coats, I think it was 2 coats of Danish wood oil. I let it cure for a week. Then I put 2 or 3 coats of wipe on poly. I let that cure for a few days. You want to let it harden up. And then I worked it down with 4/0 steel wool and Minwax furniture paste wax, and it leaves a buttery smooth surface and a nice even sheen all the way around. Now if you want high gloss, you could use spray on lacquer, spray on polyurethane, brushing lacquer, wipe on poly. You could use walnut oil and beeswax if you wanted to turn these into little candy and nut dishes, or put mints or something in. You know, you could easily make these little bowls. You don't have to make them tea light holders. You could make key bowls and change bowls. I mean, jewelry holders, you know, put a dowel, finial in the center of it. You know, you got a ring and jewelry holder. So really, your imagination's the limit. And you're just using an offcut, you know, an offcut of a 2x4 that you probably have sitting around your shop somewhere. So material cost, very low. Time investment is fairly low. 2 or 3 solid hours at the lathe. You know, once you get the process down, you're going to batch out a dozen of these easy in a day. You know, a couple dozen. Spend a day turning, spend a day finishing. And, you know, with the holidays fast approaching, quick, easy gift to make. And they're nice. You know, you make a set, 3 or 4, 5, 6, however many for a person. Include the candles. Or do a set of tea light holders with a couple little bowls, whatever. So I hope you liked this video. And if you did, I hope you consider giving it a thumbs up, subscribing, hitting the notification bell, telling a few dozen friends about it, leaving me in your will. Thanks for watching, and Merry Christmas.